Thanks to all your great suggestions on what might be the source of my trouble with this 38.7, I've got a few things to try out. I've been going through and I've replaced almost all the resistors now, and I replaced the one mica cap here, 3500 picofarad. That didn't make any difference. So, three most likely culprits I got from your suggestions was the candome resistor, a bad tube, or there actually are two mica caps inside one of the IF cans that I just didn't even see when I had it opened up, so I'm not sure where they're hiding inside. But that's these two, 200 picofarad, 19C and 19D. So those might need to be replaced. I'll do the candome first because I want to replace that regardless, because these are not that reliable. I tested this the first night when I worked on this radio, and I remember the values were off a bit, but it seemed to work okay, so I didn't pay much attention to it. So let's see what we got. It should be 202, 8, and 35. Well, instead of 35, I got 41.2, and I want to see if I wiggle this a little, if the value fluctuates much. And it does fluctuate a bit. Stupid clip on. The way these work is there's like an insulated substrate that wrap a bunch of wire around it, and then they clip on these lugs, and there's pressure fit up against the resistance wire. And if they don't make good contact, it gets corroded, dirty, you can get flaky readings. This should be 8, and I got 14.7. And you see it jumps around as I wiggle the lug. And finally this section. So it's not open. Oh, that's way off. That should be 202. I got 323. And again, that's jumping all over as I wiggle the lug. Alright, so I gotta dig up those kind of oddball values. I'll get as close as I can. I'll probably get a 33, an 8.2, and a 200 or a 220. That should be fine. Wattage, I don't know. Probably 2 to 5 watts per suction would be good enough. This thing doesn't really get all that warm. I went ahead and replaced the candome resistor, but unfortunately, no improvement whatsoever. So I then went and looked at the tubes again, and although I don't have any other 6K5Gs, I do have some 6Q7s, which is a very similar triode with the addition of 2 diodes. And as long as there's nothing connected to those pins that are for the dual diodes, it's basically a drop-in replacement. So I popped that in there, also replaced the 6F6, 0 change. So the hunt continues. Another possibility I've been pondering is could the AVC be off? A problem I'm having with working on this is I don't know how much gain you should have at each stage. I don't know what the typical AVC voltage should be. They just don't give you that info. No waveforms, nothing like that. Well, back then they just most certainly didn't even have a scope, so they wouldn't give you that kind of info. All I've got is DC voltage, and even then, they don't give it for all the pins. Like in the 6K5, they just give you the plate voltage. Now, to be fair, it is just a triode, so all you've got is the heater, the cathode, and the plate. So, now that I think about it, what other voltages could they give you? Because the cathode is just grounded. So, okay, I guess that makes sense. I'll go through and check these voltages again. I also want to double check my wiring on the AVC, which would be the 6J5 in the corner here. Now, I did replace the mica cap and these 2 resistors, and I'm pretty darn sure that I got it right. I double checked, compared it to the other parts chassis I've got, but it wouldn't hurt to go over it again. I checked the DC voltages, and they're all dead on. Kind of annoying that they don't give any voltages for the 6J5 except for the heater voltage, so I don't know what that plate typically should be. Could be because if you attach a meter, it bogs the circuit down and the value becomes meaningless anyways. I just don't know. Now, something I noticed while probing the circuit is, check that out. So what's that? That is the broadcast antenna coil. That is that guy, I believe. Let's see, parts locator here. That is number 2, which is the broadcast antenna transformer. Now that one's I've been a little suspicious about since the beginning because that's the one that broke loose and it's being held in place by a bit of string and wax. However, I don't have an antenna hooked up right now, and if I pull my finger on the antenna jack, the reception improves too. But not as much as if I bring my hand near this coil. It doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with anything. That might just be the normal behavior for this radio. I have ohmed it out, and it's okay. Now, I could theoretically swap it out with one from my parts chassis, but it's not the easiest thing to get at. 4 little wires that rather inaccessible. There's one way down in there going right over to the band switch. And there's another one coming off this side and wrapping around over to the band switch. One up here. And a little guy down in there. Now, even that, sure, it's improved a lot, but that still stinks. This radio is up all the way, and that's a very strong station. Most of my radios, when I have the volume all the way down, I can still faintly hear it. So, that is still just crap. Alright, so, I'm still thinking it could be an AVC issue, and I'm still suspicious of those 2 mica caps. So, I think I will investigate those more thoroughly. First, I'll triple check the AVC wiring, and then I'll pop open that IF can. Well, I couldn't find anything wrong with any of the AVC wiring, so I popped open that second IF can to look for those 200 picofarad mica caps, and now I know why I didn't see them before. It's because they're hidden inside of this sandwich here. So on the top, we've got the 2 trimmers, 19A and 19B. Now the 100 picofarads come off of 19B, ground in between, then another one, and there's a 51K resistor across them. Well, that's the resistor down here. I've replaced that. And if you look, that's going to this lug, which goes up into this sandwich. So the deal is, the top plate, which is going to this wire over here, is one side of the variable cap. There's another metal plate down here going to this wire, that's the other side, and there's a piece of mica in between them. That's the variable cap. Below that are several more metal plates and mica. Those are the 100 picofarad caps. So, not the kind of thing you can easily replace. I guess one way to do it would be to disconnect the wire and the resistor here and leave everything else alone, and mount the 2 discrete caps down in here somewhere, and just leave the rest of it there. Otherwise, take this apart and take out those plates, and just leave the variable. But the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking it could very well be okay, because these types of caps, it's been my experience, don't go bad. Because these are not pieces of mica that are silvered. They don't have silver deposited on them. It's pieces of metal or cadmium plated steel or whatever this might be, with sheets of mica in between them. So there's no silver to migrate. They're not, in other words, they're not silvered mica. They're just mica caps. And these look to be clean and all. So I'm just not thinking that's where the problem is. So I'm going to continue looking elsewhere. Right now I'm following up on another suggestion, which is to monitor the AVC voltage. So I've got my meter probe right here, and I got about minus 0.35 volts when I'm on the strongest station I can find. Now I'm going to rotate off station, and it does drop a bit, but not that much. I don't know what the valid range is, or typical range of the AVC voltage, but when I'm off a station, it should be boosting the gain, and that voltage should go more positive, I would think, and it's not really changing all that much. A little bit. So as I hit and go past stations, it's really not varying. And the whole point of this is to make all the stations be about the same volume, and definitely some stations come in stronger than others, and this voltage really isn't doing anything. So what I think I'll try doing is boost that voltage externally. I can hook up something like this DC power supply. I'll do it through a resistor and keep the voltage really low, and see what happens when I force that voltage to vary a bit, and see if the gain goes up. Okay, I've got the power supply rigged up through a 1 meg resistor to that same junction point. Got it on 0 right now. I'm going to start increasing it. Well, that's not what I expected. As I get that voltage more positive, the volume's actually going down. Okay, try switching this around and go the other way. The reason I'm surprised is that when you buy his tubes, the more negative you make the grid, the less gain it has. Alright, well, one nice thing about this supply is that it's floating, so you can just do that easily enough. Alright, more negative, more gain.
And as they do, one of the biggest challenges they'll face is finding a job.
Okay.
That's why we're so excited.
That's more like it.
Show Your Stripes initiative. Over the past year.
Alright, so all seems like tune around a little bit.
You're right there, and you need.
Let's see what I get like on other stations. The GN is still super weak. Like the whole lower end of the dial's pretty weak.
In their direction.
But I can get it.
And Jimmy are going to
BDM.
the battle mess.
GN.
I know you're so interested in this.
Thank you for bringing us that. What are we calling that? What's the graphic we have up on the screen?
Musings.
Yeah, small difference makes a huge change. So I'm now up to negative 1.2.
Speculation.
And this is more like what I was. This is more how it should be. This volume all the way down. Slight increase. Perfectly. Yeah, it's about good listening level. I'm at maybe less than a quarter of the way up on the volume now.
They really enjoy our show so much because we're not quite right, the two of us.
That was a compliment, right?
Yeah, maybe about a third of the way up.
Chicago's very own
720 WGN.
I'm surprised that this is jumping around. It keeps going up and up and up.
Good idea. Let's go to First American Bank for a home equity loan.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. See, rates are low and real estate values are rising.
Just took a big nosedive back down.
New gutters?
Maybe it takes a little while to stabilize.
Exotic. Yeah. Point is, with a loan from First American...
Because this capacitor is fairly large, given that this is a high impedance network here with all these 1 meg resistors, so it probably takes a while when I fiddle with an external voltage for this whole thing to stabilize.
First American, the bank that does more for your money. Visit firstandbank.com. Call 847-952-3700.
All right, so
Leaking that. It's not too easy to find. 10 minutes before the top of the hour. We're back.
how do I make this work in the real world? Oh, check that out. Now when I go to a weaker station, it's all the way up to -4. Whereas before, as I turned around the dial, it was barely changing at all. This is how it's supposed to be working. So in between, or rather, it should be varying as I go, as I tune around the dial. Well, it's not quite what I expect. It seems like when there's no station, the voltage is lower or more positive. But when I hit a station, it goes more negative. Weird. So now I'm back to WGN, and a moment ago I was at around -1 volt. Now it's about -6. Even stranger, the volume really isn't changing as this voltage is jumping all over the place. And I'm manipulating the external supply until it gets really low. Maybe it's just that once you're above or below, I guess you could say -1 volt or so, it just doesn't have any effect anymore. That would make sense. Yeah, I mean, as this varies between, like, say, -7 and -1.5, the volume really isn't changing that much. It's probably just outside its range of having any effect. But definitely that range of -0.5 volt to say 1.5 volts, like, or -1 volt, like right in here, it's a huge effect on the gain.
Addressing nearly everything we talked about today.
Let's delve a little bit deeper into this AVC circuit. I got a request on the Philco forum to check out what voltages are present on either side of R27. He says it should be about -3 volts here. That's the canned ohm bias resistor that I rebuilt. And the other side, he says, should stay at about that same -3 volts when you're in between stations and go more negative when you hit stronger stations. So let's see what voltage we get there. I'm also curious to see how it varies as the radio warms up. So first, let's do the fixed side. So as the radio warms up, it looks like we're coming in on about -2.7 volts. Alright, let's check the other side. And there, yeah, we got about -2.5 volts or so. WGN coming in. Okay, not great though. This is with the volume up 100%. So it's nowhere near as loud as it was when I was forcing the AVC voltage. But at least it's there. So let's let this thing warm up and see what happens with that. So what I would expect is that it should be boosting the gain on this station because it's not coming in that loud. Not as loud as other stations are. And it is getting less negative. And the volume's staying about the same level. Now remember, this isn't the same point as when I was forcing the voltage. That was over here, so don't want to confuse these two readings. Now we can see it's rapidly dropping. Or another way to think about it, it's actually going more positive, so this should be boosting the gain. But the station's actually getting fainter. It's just about gone now. So it seems like it is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It is going more positive on a weaker station to boost the gain, but the gain's not going up. The voltage is changing, but the gain actually just dwindled away to nothing. And now we can't hear the station anymore. And the voltage is just about stabilized. Well, I will post my findings on the forum. Now, he suggested if things aren't working right, two possibilities. This resistor could be open. Brand new resistor. I'll double check it, but I don't think it is. Or we've got a high resistance leakage to ground somewhere. Could be this new mica cap I put in there, and I can certainly swap that out. Or, again, we're back to these caps buried inside of that IF can. After reporting my findings in the Philco forum, I once again got a suggestion that could be a weaker gassy tube. So yet again, I swapped out the 6A8, 6J5. I've used at least 3 of each of those types. No change. Then I got to the 6K7. I've also tried a bunch of those. Also the same problems. Finally, I tried a 4th 6K7. And now it seems to be working much better. So I've had this running for about an hour now, and the volume is staying steady. So what I want to do now is go test these tubes. So when I did that initial Friday night restoration and got this running, if you recall, the last problem I had was I had a bad 6K7 in here. And replacing that got the radio working. So since then, apparently that one went bad, and a couple others I tried. Now this one I expected to be weak, because this I know came from my Philco 3810, and I used this for several years, and it was already used to begin with. And I hung on to it even though I knew it was weak just for replacement. But these two, especially one of them, for sure tested really, really good. But I got a suggestion that maybe they're gassy, and I don't know that I tested for that. So I'm going to go retest all 3 of these and see what I get. And I want to compare it to this guy. I'm retesting all the 6K7s. First up is the one that I was pretty darn sure was weak. I hung on to it just as an emergency spare. Yep, no shorts. And P4. Yeah, it's exactly how I remember it testing. So I could understand if this one wouldn't work so well. Okay. Now I want to check for gas. It turns out that's not quite so easy to do. I have to go review the instructions precisely, but I believe the deal was you put the English on 73. You hold down gas 1, you rotate the bias till you get a reading of 100 on the meter, and then you push gas 2 and see if the needle deflects more than 1 tick. But I gotta go reread that to make sure I got it right. Okay, I did have that right. Adjust English to 73, hold down P5, adjust bias for a reading of 100 on the 3000 scale, and then you depress P6. If it's gassy, the needle will move up. So, not gassy. No shorts, just a little weak. Alright, let's try the next one. Alright, now I gotta remember to restore the settings to where they were to do the regular test, which is 18 and 63. I'm letting these tubes warm up a good long time, like 5 minutes before I test them. No shorts. This is a test I ran before. I just tested it for shorts, for conductance, tests like new. So, unless this tests for gas, I don't really know what to say. This tube and these are the two Philco branded 6K7Gs that I've been using most of the time during these chassis restoration videos. And for sure I know one of them tested really good, and I think they both did. So, the last thing I can think of is, well, two things. One is, can't trust my tube tester, or maybe there's a dirty socket or a loose connection somewhere on the 6K7 socket. So, let's try that gas test. 73, P5, adjust the bias, 200, press 6, no gas. Alright, so, apparently, well, like I said, either I can't trust my tube tester for this particular type of tube, or I got a bad connection somewhere. Now, as for this last 6K7, I tried testing it, but I couldn't get a filament glow. I then tested it with an ohmmeter for continuity, and it does have continuity, about 3 ohms. But when I tried hooking up to a power supply and checked the current, it kept spiking up and then dropping off. And I would wiggle the pins a little or tap the side of the tube, and the current would jump back up and then drop right back down. Tried heating up the filament pins, even shoved some wire in there and tried connecting to these extensions, and same deal. So I think there's either a loose element inside this tube or a short somewhere. The filament just will not stay lit. Alright, so out of the 3 Philco 6K7s, one tests great, one is weak, and this one's flaky. So I've now gone back to that one that tests really good. I got a suggestion to do a life test by dropping the filament from 6.3 to 5 and see if the conductance drops off. So here we are at 6.3, and we get about 2400 on the meter. Drop the juice down to 5, and it's dropping off to a little above 2300, which is still very much in the good range and not that much of a drop. Still, it's still testing like a very good tube, so I still am puzzled about that. Now, I went searching again and I found one more 6K7. This one looks a bit weird. These others have a mesh in the top. This one's solid. Don't know what difference that really makes. Also, this is made by Sylvania, and it's a military one apparently. So let's give this a try. It's in better condition than that Zenith, and if this one works, I'm inclined to keep this one on the radio. Alright, no shorts, and that's definitely the good, but not quite as good as that Philco. So we'll see how this works out in the actual radio. Well, it turns out that tube works just fine. So in spite of the fact that Philco does better, it doesn't behave properly in this radio, but the Sylvania does. I've had this radio playing off and on for the past couple hours, no problems. So I'm going to leave that tube in this set and continue on with the project. So I wouldn't exactly say mystery solved, but seems to be because of that tube. And I don't entirely know why, but hey, it's working. I'm happy. Now, I do have a Philco 3810 with a very, very similar design that I plan to get up on the workbench in the near future for a little tune-up. So I'm going to hang on to that Philco tube, and when I got that chassis up here, I'm going to pop it into it and see if it works properly in that radio.